Your Excellency, Pariyegak, ambassadors, distinguished members and guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you, Mr. Prime Minister, and your distinguished delegation to the German Council on Foreign Relations. You come to Berlin at a pivotal moment for Armenia, for the South Caucasus, and for broader regional cooperation. After the meeting in August between Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders with US President Donald Trump, Armenia and Azerbaijan appear closer than ever to a settlement of the long-standing conflict between the two nations. The hope is that the peace agreement will not only transform bilateral relations, but also the entire landscape of the region and maybe beyond. Hopes are running high. The beginning of a strategic shift with far-reaching implications is possible. A functioning east-west and north-south transit hub in the heart of the Caucasus would position Armenia as a key connector between Europe and Asia. Armenia's growing interest in EU integration, along with the recent launch of the visa liberalization process, signals both ambition and readiness for deeper political and economic alignment with Europe. Today's event even gives us an opportunity to reflect on where the process stands and where it may lead. Following the keynote addressed by you, Mr. Prime Minister, our distinguished panelists will help us assess the status of the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. They will explore the opportunities and challenges that will lie ahead as Armenia defines its evolving role in a rapidly changing geopolitical environment. Importantly, we will also look at the domestic situation in Armenia. With parliamentary elections scheduled for June next year, Armenia enters a period that could either consolidate the country's current trajectory or introduce new dynamics in the foreign policy orientation. Mr. Prime Minister, we are eager to listen to your keynote speech. You are a well-known visitor to DGAP. We remember vividly your speech in March 2023. After your keynote, we are happy to host a distinguished panel to discuss the issues with the following personalities. We've got Daria Isachenko, is a research assistant at the Center for Applied Turkey Studies at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. We have Sergei Lagodinsky, is a member of the European Parliament for the European Green Party since 2019. He serves also as co-president of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. Finally, we have Michael Thumann is foreign affairs correspondent for Die Zeit. Since 2021, he heads the newspaper's Moscow office. So finally, there's Stefan Meister, who will moderate our discussion. He's the head of our Center for Governance and Order and Governance in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Central Asia. Let me wholeheartedly thank everybody involved in the organization of this event, particularly our friends from the Armenian Embassy in Berlin. My heartfelt gratitude also goes out to the Center for Order and Governance in Eastern Europe, headed by Stefan Meister. If it had not been for him or his able team, particularly Katja Wall, this event would not have taken place. I also want to thank our event team, particularly Lili Tran. The tech team and my personal assistant, Clemens Weisburg, also made invaluable contributions to this conference. Thank you all very much for joining us and for engaging in what promises to be a very timely and thought-provoking discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to you all. Without further ado, Your Excellency, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute privilege to return to the German Council on Foreign Relations after 2 years. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for welcoming me for the second time. If we try to compare the titles of today's discussion, Armenians' perspectives of peace, institutionalization, regional connectivity, and relations with the EU, with the previous one, security and stability in the South Caucasus, It will show the historic developments and further perspectives in our region of the South Caucasus. Today, I can announce with confidence that on August 8 in Washington, D.C., peace was established between Armenia and Azerbaijan when, with the President of Azerbaijan, we signed a joint declaration witnessed by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. According to the declaration, Armenia and Azerbaijan highlighted the need to chart a course for a bright future, not bound by the conflict of the past and consistent with the Charter of the United Nations and the 1991 Almaty Declaration. We committed ourselves to pave the way for closing the chapter of enmity between our two countries. We resolutely reject and exclude any attempt of revenge now and in the future. The agreed-upon text of the Agreement on Establishment of Peace and Interstate Relations between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan was initialed by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Armenia and Azerbaijan in the presence of President Trump, President Aliyev, and myself. One of the key breakthroughs reached in Washington was the agreement to open communications between the two countries, between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for intrastate, bilateral, and international transportation on the basis of respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and jurisdiction of the states. These efforts are to include unimpeded connectivity between the main part of the Republic of Azerbaijan and its Nachichevan Autonomous Republic through the territory of the Republic of Armenia, with reciprocal benefits for international and intrastate connectivity for the Republic of Armenia. Now, together with our American counterparts, we are engaged in intensive negotiations on the general terms of implementation of Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, Trip Route Connectivity Project, which also was agreed in the framework of the signed declaration. TRIP Company, an Armenian-American joint venture, will be registered in Armenia and will be granted a right to develop the necessary infrastructure of railway, road, oil, and gas pipelines, and fiber optics. We will move to the actual implementation and construction phase as early as next year. The implementation of this project, which is fully in line with our government's Crossroads of Peace initiative, will create additional interlinks and interdependencies in the region, becoming yet another very important factor for peace. In fact, the Trip Route project, together with the opening of communications between Armenia and Turkey, have full potential to become an important component of the Middle Corridor, providing unimpeded connectivity between Europe, South Caucasus, and Central Asia. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to inform you that the political agreement to open communications between Armenia and Azerbaijan is already becoming a reality. In October, Azerbaijan announced that it is lifting restrictions on the transit of goods through its territory to Armenia, and I appreciate this decision and announcement of President of Azerbaijan, because this is very significant and positive development. Something that appeared impossible only months ago is now a reality. Grain has been transported from Kazakhstan to Armenia through Azerbaijan and Georgia by railway, which is an unprecedented event since our independence. On our turn, as we have announced publicly, Armenia is ready, both politically and technically, even today, to enable the transit of cargo between Turkey and Azerbaijan through its territory. With all this being said, I'm confident that through daily care for established peace, adherence to the text and spirit of Washington Declaration, and the rejection of narratives that could derail the process, the Armenian and Azerbaijani governments will be able to institutionalize lasting peace between our two countries. Of course, speaking about our region, I should also update this distinguished audience on the current state of play between Armenia and Turkey. Since our previous meeting at the German Council of Foreign Relations, we have witnessed an intensification of contacts between Armenia and Turkey. These contacts are taking place at nearly all levels. Between myself and President Erdogan, our foreign ministers and special representatives, the two ministers of foreign affairs, and as well as relevant line ministries. In practice, we maintain very active talks and relations with official Ankara, even in the absence of de jure diplomatic relations. And I hope that Turkey will make the long-awaited political decision to open its border with Armenia and establish diplomatic relations. The normalization of Armenia-Turkey relations, peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Triprut project, Armenia's and Azerbaijani good neighborly relations with Georgia and Iran, constructive dialogue with Russia can position the South Caucasus as one of the most attractive transit corridors alongside both the north-south and east-west routes. And we are working hardly to realize this historic opportunity. Distinguished colleagues, in March of this year, the National Assembly of Armenia adopted the law on initiating the process of Armenia's accession to the European Union. Many ask when Armenia will become a member of the European Union and how realistic this goal is. The law on initiating the process of Armenia's accession to the European Union is above all an incentive for us, for Armenia, to consistently pursue democratic reforms. Our aim is to be institutionally and practically compliant with European standards, because without compliance, European membership in the European Union is impossible. Once Armenia objectively meets these European standards, two paths will lie ahead. Either we will be accepted as an EU member state, or we will not. Of course, our preferred scenario is the first one, but even if membership is not granted, we will have achieved a major milestone. Armenia will be a country that meets the most advanced modern standards. Our aspiration to comply with European Union standards is not driven by geopolitics, but by democratic choice. Since the peaceful Velvet Revolution of 2018, Armenia has committed as a matter of strategy to democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and an independent judiciary. On this path, just a week ago, Armenia and the European Union adopted the strategic agenda of the Armenia-EU partnership, which complements the already existing comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. We are currently exploring opportunities for sectoral integration in areas such as digital and telecommunications, energy, and connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, we paid special attention to the economic component of my visit to Germany while also making use of the occasion to strengthen dialogue between representatives of the Armenian and German business communities. To support such contacts, our government must foster the mobility of our business people, and accordingly, I'm pleased to note that we have successfully launched the visa liberalization dialogue with the European Union. This marks an important step toward enhancing mobility, intensifying people-to-people contacts, and developing intercultural ties. Recently, we received the Visa Liberalization Action Plan, which outlines the main benchmarks and key commitments of the government of Armenia. Upon its successful implementation, a visa-free regime will be established, further promoting active exchanges between Armenia and the European Union. Dear colleagues, it is difficult to fully cover the topic of Armenia-EU relations and partnership in these opening remarks, as today it is truly comprehensive, encompassing nearly all possible areas. I am confident that the 8th European Political Community Summit and the Armenia-EU Summit to be held in Yerevan next May will provide a new opportunity both to assess the progress of our relations and to set even more ambitious targets for the years ahead. Allow me to conclude my speech by emphasizing the importance of strengthening relations with EU member states as well, which provides additional opportunities to learn and cooperate on a bilateral basis. Of course, alongside other like-minded partners, Germany plays a central role for Armenia, and the adoption of the strategic agenda between our countries elevates our relations to a new level, creating new conditions for our strategic partnership. Thank you.
I'm very happy to have to host the Prime Minister of Armenia again after 2 years, and I'm also very happy that we are in a very different situation now in the region and also between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I think this is really a big breakthrough, and I think this is one of the few success stories, I would say, at the moment in the world in terms of really rapprochement between two countries. Our Vice President already introduced the panel, so I will just use the time to quickly the panel here, and then give you also the opportunity with around 20 minutes to ask questions afterwards. So let me start maybe also with you after your keynote, Mr. Prime Minister. You said recently Armenian society will uphold peace with the parliamentary election next year. How much the peace process is linked with your own person, and how much this is also in a way your key legacy after the Velvet Revolution? So how you see now, I think this is a key election, yeah, we can also say after the Velvet Revolution. So where do you see your legacy in a way and your role also in this?
Thank you very much. Of course, upcoming elections are very important, because my assessment is it is a historic opportunity for our country and, by the way, for our region to enter to totally different phase of our history. So I mean really now we have unprecedented opportunity to establish long-lasting peace. And by the way, it is very important from point of view of protecting and strengthening the statehood, independence, sovereignty of countries of our region. Because when people are asking why this deal become possible now and not for, I think, for several years ago. There are many factors, of course, but there is, I think, one of the most important factors of influence for developing this deal is mutual perception of common interests of, for example, of countries of our region, because you know that we become independent countries in 1991. I mean, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, and in a result of collapse of Soviet Union, and it was kind of a totally new situation. But not with totally new perception of what happened and what's happening. And now I think the most important factor for this peace deal was the new perception and new point of view to our region, and that is really unprecedented situation. And we can build on that to make our countries more independent, more sovereign, and more secure. But I think it is a kind of mutual achievement for Armenia and for Azerbaijan, and from point of view our internal policy, of course, it is a very important achievement for civil contract party, our party, and our political team. With that team together, we made Velvet Non-Violent People's Revolution in 2018, and I'm very glad that we've been able to pass through this very difficult times through health, let's say, and to achieve to this point.
Thank you very much. Sergei, let's move to you. You recently chaired Euronest Parliamentary Assembly in the Armenian Parliament, so there seems to be quite a good exchange also with the Armenian Parliament. How do you see, from a EU and also European Parliament perspective, the relations with Armenia at this point, also with regard to rapprochement with EU, connectivity? So what has changed from your perspective, or where are we at this point?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Prime Minister, for the great speech. I think we are in a phase, from our perspective, from the European perspective, in a phase of, I would call it a geostrategic realignment with Armenia. This is an example of how, I would dare to say, the era of post-Soviet is over, and you're right. We lived in 30 years where also we looked at the countries through the lens of this being a post-Soviet space. It's over. This is number one. Number two, the era of looking at the region as a periphery is over. We used to look at the Europeans as a center and everything as periphery. We called it Eastern Neighborhood, Partnership, whatever. We are in a totally different world, and this is an opportunity. And that's why connectivity is not about a center and periphery. It's about a bundle of different bilateral and multilateral relationships, and we are trying to sort them in a way that would be geopolitically and economically and democratically beneficial, both for the EU, but also for our partners. And that's where we are. I think if we're looking at Armenia, the 3 points that are especially important to us is, number one, the opening of Armenia towards the society, the democratization, the transparency. momentum there. Of course, we're looking with great excitement about the elections that are upcoming. We just spoke about that now before. What can we contribute? What can our other partners contribute, like Moldova, from their own experience to a successful democratic elections? Number two is, of course, that Armenia is a reliable peace partner. I think it's a huge achievement, and even I have goosebumps when I'm saying it, that it goes without saying that our good friend, ambassador of Azerbaijan, is sitting here. Mr. Agaev, it's great to see you here alongside with everyone else. This is a natural exchange, and we have to support it. And I know the role of Yuma, for example, is somewhat, you can talk about this, but there is a contribution of the EU also in this process, and we can do more about that. And by the way, speaking about that, I think this is a great example of personal leadership and what personal leadership and responsibility and courage can do. And from that perspective, Prime Minister, thank you very much for what you've done personally for this peace process. Without you, nothing would have been possible. And I'm the last one to be to talk kind of more person-oriented, but in this case, it's your personal achievement, I think, and also of President Aliyev, of course. And the third one is the issue of connectivity. How can we translate technical, digital, transportation policies, where we are joining forces now together, into a real geopolitical alignment and opening up of the region, opening the borders? We're talking to our Turkey partners about that all the time. I know that with Azerbaijan now, there is also a movement on how the goods can be transported, the energy can be transported. Marta Kos, our commissioner, has announced 500 million for a trip where they will close the grid towards Georgia and hopefully soon also towards Turkey, so that the energy flows can go. And by that, we're getting Armenia out of this self-imposed isolation, which is dependency on one particular country, and bringing it into a truly multilateral regional context. And this is where Europe can really contribute, and we're ready to do so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Daria, let's move to you as one of the key Turkey experts here in Berlin. I wanted to ask you how Turkey sees this peace process, where it sees its own role. We just saw negotiations on border opening and transit and transport between Armenia and Turkey, and Turkish officials also considering opening border within the next 6 months. So how realistic all of this is? So do you see really here a dynamic going on? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I intend to use it also to ask Prime Minister a question about normalization with Turkey. But before I do, I will gladly provide some background to my question. This is not the first attempt at for normalization between Armenia and Turkey, but I think there are very important differences between the current wave of rapprochement and 2008-2009. One major difference is that normalization between Armenia and Turkey takes place alongside the peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And another major difference, I think, is that back then it was a kind of a comprehensive approach, and now there is a really narrow focus, and I would say it centers very much on opening the border, the current process of normalization between Armenia and Turkey. But regardless whether we compare or not the two waves, I think it is important to distinguish, when we look at normalization, it is important to distinguish between result-oriented approach and process-oriented approach. What do I mean by result-oriented approach? It's precisely about the result. And while expecting the result, relations between Armenia and Turkey are in fact triangular. It's a triangular relationship, trilateral relationship, where Azerbaijan is also a factor. And just last month in November, the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan restated the position of Ankara is that normalization between Armenia and Turkey is very much based on the progress made in the talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and as he elaborated, there are still two issues remaining. This is the connectivity question, what Prime Minister also already mentioned, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, one, and another issue is the changes in the Armenian constitution. So according to the Turkish foreign minister, these two issues are still there, and Ankara will not proceed because there is a concern it's going to turn into a frozen conflict. Now, this is the result-oriented approach, but my suggestion is also to look at normalization between Turkey and Armenia as a process-oriented approach. And here, two things are important. First, this is indeed a bilateral process between Armenia and Turkey. And the second thing is that there appears to be a discrepancy between the willingness on the political leadership, and as Prime Minister also mentioned, there is intensification of contacts, but there is a gap indeed between the political leadership and the readiness at the level of society. There have been several public opinion surveys conducted by International Republican Institute. There was also a joint survey conducted in Armenia and Turkey. Was conducted by Caucasus Research Resource Center Armenia Foundation and Conda Research and Consultancy Company, published by the Frank Dink Foundation. Just to give you a picture of these surveys, for example, of June 2025, this year by Republican International Institute, 65% of Armenians evaluate the current state of relationship with Turkey as bad and 30% as good. Now, it will take time for Turkey to compete to become the top political partner. The current top 5 are now Iran, France, Russia, India, and the United States. And by the way, I think the European Union will be well advised to study those opinion polls because the EU comes as 7th, which is after China. And as the saying goes, don't shoot the messenger. But if we come back to Turkey, this is a significant progress because the numbers, for example, for 2018, 2019, were that 98% evaluated the current state of relationship with Turkey as bad. So for Turkey, there is a dynamic. When it comes to the question of border opening, 56% of respondents in Armenia oppose, whereas 42 respondents support. The numbers are slightly different by those two sources that I've mentioned, but the dynamic is the same. The majority actually disapprove. So the number of those who disapprove is higher than those who approve. And I think if we look at these figures in the public service, it also needs to be placed within the context of a general attitude. And here there is also a gap between perception and reality. Just to give you one last example with figures, when Armenian respondents were asked what kind of attitude do you think Turks have about Armenians in general, 42.5 stated as very negative. Whereas when Turkish respondents were actually asked what kind of attitude would you say you have about Armenians, the percentage was 11.1%. So there is still a lot to do for the borders to be opened both on the ground but also in the minds. And as I promised, I conclude with a question to Prime Minister. What do you make out of these figures, and what is your personal assessment of the public mood in Armenia, and whether there are any measures planned, maybe some kind of a roadmap that would address normalization process between Armenia and Turkey at the level of society? Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. I think it's very important to emphasize this is a process. This is a process of change after decades also of very difficult relations, and with Turkey it's even longer. So I think it's important to start this process, and I think this is exactly what has happened. I would move to Michael Thumann, and then I would give it back to Prime Minister just in the end, and then I will open up here. Michael, you are still in Moscow. You're observing also Armenia, the South Caucasus, and the entire region from a Moscow perspective. So how does Russia look on all these changes in the South Caucasus, especially since 2022 war started in Ukraine? I think its role has really changed in the region. And how does it look on Armenia also as a country who has recently met the Prime Minister also with the President of Aliyev, met also Donald Trump, and we see more US engagement and EU engagement also in the region.
This is working now. Thank you very much. Well, Russia, of course, has come down from a very high position for 3 decades, being the main arbiter in the South Caucasian region, when it offered guns and money and special envoys, and it keeps soldiers in the region, and it benefited, obviously, from crises and wars in the region. But you mentioned it, Stefan, since 2022, things have become very different, because since the war of aggression against Ukraine, Russia's influence, firstly, in the region has been waning. Secondly, it had this fall to accept the expansion of US influence in the region. And thirdly, it has been grounded in disputes with both Armenia and Azerbaijan. So let me just look briefly at this last point, the disputes. There was a dispute started with Armenia in 2023 when Azerbaijan took over Nagorno-Karabakh, and the question aroused about the role of Russian peacekeepers and what kind of peace they kept there. The peacekeepers eventually had to withdraw. And there are disputes about disinformation campaigns, attacks against the Armenian prime minister. So there are lots of vocal attacks, and there are lots of smaller disputes on a day-to-day basis. There has been also a strong dispute with Azerbaijan in 2025 when Russian PVO, when Russian anti-aircraft forces shot down a Azerbaijani passenger plane and then actually prevented this plane from performing an emergency landing. And also about the arrest of ethnic Azeris in Yekaterinburg this summer. So. And this all has been accompanied by constant attacks, which I was referring to, just to mention one of them, which is Margarita Simonyan, a harsh critic of the Armenian government, who has openly called, and she, as the editor-in-chief of RT and Sputnik, is a very powerful person, of course, particularly for Russian public opinion, called openly for regime change and to oust the prime minister. So, the Washington Agreement of August 2025 has changed a lot. And let us pause here for a second just to assess how revolutionary an agreement this was, also from a Russian perspective. Because just 5 years ago, it would have been any agreement unthinkable without the direct participation of Russia. Today, this is very different, and we can tell by the words of Maria Zakharova, who, after the agreement, and Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry, as you all know, who said, well, the meeting of the leaders of the South Caucasus republics, which is a strange way to put it, the meeting of the leaders of the South Caucasus republics in Washington, mediated by the American side, deserves a positive assessment. So years ago, this would have been unthinkable if the Americans would have mediated anything there in the region. Let's just note that. While, of course, and probably needless to say, any European attempt to mediate is, of course, met with very harsh words from the Russian side. Vis-à-vis Azerbaijan, Russia has been very cautious. They were eager to diffuse this crisis, and particularly after the Washington Agreement, then they took the initiative when Putin met with President Aliyev in Beijing, and they agreed to diffuse. Putin eventually pronounced something of an awkward apology to the victims of the plane and the downing of the Azerbaijani aircraft. So, to sum up, I would say Russia's role in the region has been weakened, and it has lost significant influence after the invasion of Ukraine. And of course, the Azerbaijani military campaigns, both in 2020 and 2023. And Russia also since has behaved at times recklessly with both states, Armenian and Azerbaijan. But I would note that there's still some influence, especially in Armenia, with the influence Russia has within the Armenian opposition. It has economic influence, some military influence, obviously, with the bases. So this is not to be underestimated. But I think there are only two options for Russia to regain its posture in the region or to regain stronger influence. And this is only if. Firstly, if the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan fails, then Russia has new openings in order to exert more influence. Or second, if Russia wins the war in Ukraine and has the opportunity then to exert pressure on the region and on Europe simultaneously.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would give it for a quick reaction back to you, and then I would open, but I would add one more question. I think there is one main obstacle for signing finally the peace agreement, and that is the constitutional change in Armenia. So when do you expect will this happen, or will this happen, and do you think Armenians will support this?
Thank you very much. As far as public opinion surveys are concerned, you know, we just discussed democracy and leadership, and my position is that democracy and leadership aren't only for following after the public opinion, but to create and change public opinion. And it is our strategy. In general, you know, what is our strategy, long-lasting strategy for Armenia? And what do we want to change? Our strategy is make Armenia to be able to live in our region without external aid and external support. So I think it is very important nuance. It isn't about cutting foreign affairs with the international community and partners, but you know, our goal is to be able to discuss our regional agenda with our regional countries, and to be able to create an atmosphere of, let's say, accord and as much as it's possible, because we won't have never situation without with zero problems. It won't happen. But you know, problems are everywhere, and in Europe there are many nuances. Let's say even tension between states, etc., etc. But the leadership about the managing all that situation, to be able to create peace and to maintain peace. And that's why now what is our narrative? We are saying that peace is established, definitely, and we can see it on the ground, but from the other side, it needs for everyday care, without exaggeration, for everyday care. And without everyday care, it will be at risk, definitely. Your question? Yeah, you know, our position is very open, because when Azerbaijan is raising that concern, saying that in the constitution of the Republic of Armenia there are territorial claims against Azerbaijan, not to bore you, but we can prove that there is no any territorial claim in our constitution to Azerbaijan, and we can prove that de jure, and we can prove that practically. Moreover, you know, even because in Armenia also we have some interpretations and readings of the constitution of Azerbaijan, that there are territorial claims in the constitution of Azerbaijan on Armenia. But why we don't raise that issue? Why we don't raise that issue? Because in the agreed upon text of agreement, establishment of peace and interstate relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which was initialed in Washington, all those issues are addressed, because it is, by the way, it is already public document, and everyone could find it in internet and read. In the first article of that agreement, there is provision that Armenia and Azerbaijan recognize each other's territorial integrity, taking into account that Soviet time administrative borders became state borders. Basing on that, Armenia and Azerbaijan have no any territorial claims to each other, and obliged not to raise such claims in the future. And moreover, there is another provision in this initial agreement that none of the parties may invoke to their internal legislation to fail the implementation of this current agreement, etc., etc. Moreover, in our constitution, there is provision that ratified international documents have higher legal force than local legislation. So in general, let's to touch upon very directly to your question. Let's imagine that now peace agreement is signed. After that, according to our constitution and legislation, we will need to send it to the Constitutional Court to check the compliance of that document with our constitution. And when we will send it to Constitutional Court, there is two versions. First one, if Constitutional Court would decide that it is fully compliant with our constitution, there is no any obstacle for ratifying that agreement. And when it is ratified according to our constitution, it will receive a highest legal force in our country. But I said publicly, in case if our constitutional court maybe will decide that it isn't compliant with our constitution, I already publicly said that personally I will initiate the constitutional changes. So why I'm trying to explain this, because in reality there is no any issue and obstacle in our constitution. In case when we will look at issue objectively, and we are ready to address the concerns of Azerbaijan to sit and to discuss nuances. And by the way, there was even idea to make international legal expertise to understand the answer for that question. But, you know, from the other side, my answer wouldn't be full without mentioning another nuance. From 2018, we internally, and it is connected only with our internal issues and with strengthening of our democracy and our statehood, we have agenda of adoption of new constitution. And recently, in a declaration of the convention of our party, we announced that after getting a new mandate from our people, in a result of elections of 2026, we will initiate an adoption of totally new constitution for the Republic of Armenia. But it is, you know, we don't discuss this topic because it is totally internal topic. We don't discuss that in the framework of peace with Azerbaijan because it is totally our internal issue. And yes, I'm sure that our people will vote for new constitution because it is about strengthening our democracy, our statehood, our independence, and of course, it will have maybe some regional and international impact as well.
Thank you very much. We have very few time for questions. I would give the ambassador to Azerbaijan the first word. Can we have quickly the mic? Then Markus Mecke.
Vielen Dank, Herr Dr. Meister. Barigalus Germania, Mr. Prime Minister. Welcome to Germany. I fully agree. Our region is undergoing a tremendous transformation, unthinkable, unimaginable just a few years ago. This is the most stable and peaceful period in our relations since we both achieved or regained our independence. It's a great also relief that our next generations, our children, grandchildren will not inherit this painful and long-standing conflict and hopefully will live permanently in peace. Azerbaijan was, of course, the initiator of the peace agenda, and we have acted with clarity and purpose. And you've mentioned the real benefits of the peace. The peace is paying off. We've taken some important steps, and some other important steps will follow, hopefully, soon. And we, of course, hope that the agreements that we achieved in Washington will be fulfilled and fully, including, of course, this route, trip route, that connecting unimpeded connectivity for Azerbaijan and its Nachichevan region, which is of great importance. On the last hurdle about the constitution, we hope that will also be removed so that we can formally sign the peace agreement. But already now we are living in the peace era and both sides are emphasizing it. And on a lighter note, our German friends like to remind us all the time to look at the German-French example. But I must say the truth is it took Germany and France 18 years to get to peace. But it took us just 5 years to arrive there. So actually, our joint Azerbaijani-Armenian team beat the other team for 13 years. So we can congratulate ourselves in this regard. Our peoples lived peacefully together. And we can do it again, I'm sure of it. And Azerbaijan is determined to go on that path towards peace, stability, and prosperity in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. Markus Mecke. I'll take maybe two more because you have to leave sharp.
Markus Mecke. I wish you good luck in that peace process, which is crucial. And I wish you, Mr. Prime Minister, good luck for the next election because you are the only hope for democracy in the whole region. We have to remember that if you look around all your neighbors, you are the light of democracy, and hopefully it will remain. My question is linked to the domestic situation, and especially the church. There is a lot of hostile behavior of the church against your government and against the situation and linked with the opposition. which chance do you see, even in the church or in the society, really to have success?
David, really very short question.
Sure, will be very brief. Thanks a lot for this very hope-inspiring input, Mr. Prime Minister. I have also one question, and that
Introduce yourself, maybe, just quickly.
Yeah, sure. I'm Dr. David Leupold from Humboldt University. My question would be, I know that you focus much more on a present-oriented approach and on the idea of Real Hayastan, like real Armenia, but I was wondering how to actually realign also historical narratives. Is there a kind of strategy also for bringing together historical narratives in order to move on to the future? Because I was still wondering, this is of course something that needs to be also addressed by the Azerbaijani leadership, by Turkish leadership, but the question is how to build different generations without addressing, of course, the question of changing also education, historical education, that might create a different idea of the neighbor. And I was wondering what is the kind of educational strategy also in a long term for your next term. Thanks a lot.
I would take Katja here. Can we quickly?
Thank you very much. My name is Katja Kikardishvili. I'm from Center for Liberal Modernity. I'm program director for a very important program, Eastern Partnership. And I have a question to Prime Minister Pashinyan, and it is about the EU integration of Armenia. You mentioned this also in your keynote. I see Armenia as very important, most important and strongest partner from the European Union in the region. And you personally and your government is also hope, not for pro-European society in Armenia, also from Georgia. I am from Georgia and I can say this. So my question is, what are the concrete steps for Armenia regarding the EU integration? Because we have the election campaign will start now. What is on the top? It is a visa liberalization, and you also are planning to apply the membership of European Union in the next year after the election. And the second question, very shortly, about the Russian influence. So we see this threat from Russia, especially Georgians, and I'm not agree with you, Mr. Journalist, that the Russian influence in region is weak. So we see this in Georgia is very, very strong. The question is, how can Germany and EU protect and support Armenia during this election campaign, and also on this day, election day, from the Russian influence and election manipulation from Russia? Thank you.
I have to take this lady in the back and then we close it because she...
Thank you very much, Barav Bolorin. I have actually a ton of questions, but I'm going to keep it short. Yes. Short. I think addressing the hostages that are still being kept in Baku from the 2020 war are very important to mention, because in my word of understanding, if you agree on a peace deal, you still have to actually take steps to ensure peace. And if people from war are still being imprisoned and are held hostage in a country you agree on a peace deal with, I think legal measures should be taken. And how with the Armenian, how do you put it? Yeah, I think I will keep it that.
Okay. Can I give it back to you?
Thank you. I will start from our path and strategy to European Union and from point of view of Georgia. In the top of our agenda connected with European Union is the success for Georgia to reconciliate with the European Union, because I will be sincere. When and why we adopted this European strategy? When Georgia received the status of candidate for European Union, and we felt that our path to European Union is opening, and we saw an opportunity for us. And after that, unfortunately, some problems emerged in relations between European Union and Georgia, and I think it is one of the most tangible problems for Armenia, for the European perspective. And that's why I think, and that obviously the resolution and addressing this situation for Armenia is very important. As far as history is concerned, you know, it is very important to decide how to interact with history. It is very important. You know, there is a very important saying that we need to learn lessons of history. But you know, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. But what is the problem? Problem is that there is no concrete instruction in which page of history the lessons are written to open. Okay, there is no instruction. Take a book of history, I don't know, printed in 1972 in Germany or in Russia or in Armenia, open the page 173, and there in the first part of page, the lessons of history are written. So our perception is that, our perception is for us, for our country and for our nation, the most important message of our history request not to repeat that history again and again, and to try to open and to try to create a totally new history for our country and for our nation. Because you know, it is obvious, and all knows that, all know that, and that is the one of the features of our nation to be understood worldwide. Sufferings, genocide, etc., etc. But you know, we decided to turn our view to and concentrate, not repeat that history, and that will be the most important tribute. And the statehood, independence, sovereignty, prosperity, and peace for our country, it would be the biggest tribute to all victims of our nation of all times, and that is our strategy. And by the way, there is no nation considering that they haven't suffered. All nations, they are considering that they suffered, and every nation has its own sufferings and strategies, etc., etc. But our strategy, first of all, not to repeat the same history again and again, but try to create a totally new, more optimistic and more prosperous and more peaceful history. And now today we are trying to do that. Yeah, about church, you know, it is a very sensitive topic, especially to make it a more understandable for European audience. You know, I just was speaking about compliance with standards. This whole story on the topic of church, it is only about compliance. First of all, compliance of church with its own rules. What do we want? We want transparency, accountability, compliance with the rules of Armenian Apostolic Church. I mean compliance of clergymen, etc. Because not compliant situation is making clergymen more vulnerable for foreign influences and for making them, I'm sorry to formulate like this, a tool for foreign influence. And we just want we just want compliance of church in general and clergymen particularly, and leadership of church to be compliant, to be accountable. Nobody knows how our church is being financed. Nobody knows how many, what amount of money is entering, how it is being spent. And you know what is the biggest problem? Some of the leadership of clergymen are living in a embarrassing health, but another part of ordinary clergymen, they are living in a, without exaggeration, in poverty. And it is problem. It is problem. And it is harming the moral atmosphere of our country. We want to have value-based society. But I'm saying that it isn't possible to have value-based society when the epicenter of our set of values is contaminated. And we need to have reforms. We need to make our church compliant with our society, in front of our society, and make it transparent, and to have some tools to check the integrity of clergymen, etc., etc. So I think our agenda is totally transparent, without any hidden nuance and moment. Because some people, they are saying that government and prime minister is acting against Armenian Apostolic Church. You know, it isn't possible, because I'm follower and I'm believer of Armenian Apostolic Church. I'm believer of Jesus Christ. I'm follower of Jesus Christ. Recently, I announced that Jesus Christ is heart of mine. And I can't act against Jesus Christ and against my own church. It is my own church, you know. And it is our church. The most part of more than 90% of our government, they are followers of Armenian Apostolic Church. And they and we want to have compliant and transparent and accountable and honest and value-based church. In case of, I would like to react to Ambassador of Azerbaijan, and I'm thankful for warm welcoming. But you know, from the other side, I'm wondering whether Azerbaijan wants presence of territorial claims in the constitution of Armenia or not. Sometimes, you know, my impression is that our Azerbaijani colleagues, they are very keen. They want to our constitution to contain territorial claims against Azerbaijan. But you know, there is no, we don't have territorial claims. And we're ready to prove that. And it is obvious. And so, as I said already, but what is our strategy? Our strategy is to be persistent, without nerves, in a positive and peaceful atmosphere, to represent and explain all nuances of our position. But you know, the reality is, even taking into consideration that Azerbaijan sincerely thinks that there are territorial claims in the constitution of Armenia. You know what is the quickest way to address that issue? it is to sign peace agreement and to send it. I said already, it is compulsory, and after that, Armenian government will send it to our constitutional court. And when our constitutional court would decide that it is fully compliant, I mean agreement, with our constitution, it will go to the parliament, will be ratified, and will get highest legal force. And in that case, they won't be, not theoretically, not practically, there can't be any territorial claim by Azerbaijan to Armenia. But in case if our constitutional court will decide that the agreement isn't compliant with our constitution, I said already, and it is my obligation, it is our obligation to initiate constitutional changes. And that is our position. And there was one more question about detainees. You know, it is very sensitive issue. And what is our position? Our position that this issue will be addressed more easily in the atmosphere of cooperation and peace than in atmosphere of conflict. In atmosphere of conflict, there is no way for addressing that issue. But as the peace, as we moving toward strengthening peace, it is becoming more and more realistic, little by little, to resolve that issue. That is our position. So making peace, it means to solve other issues as well. It is our perception.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I don't want to make your delegation more nervous. I think we have to finish. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for taking the time, also for discussing here with us and taking questions. I would like also to thank the panel for joining us, for your inputs and for the exchange, and thank you for coming. And we hope we can host you again. All the best.